On this week's episode of Action Timelines, we're actually going to contrast the two different timelines of a classic series, the old school and the remake version of this series. We're going to talk about the Death Race films. That's right, we're going to figure out the timeline of a series where several of the films say the date right in the title. The starting pistol went off in 1975 with Death Race 2000, which starts with an announcement that it's the 20th annual Transcontinental Road Race, and we meet our drivers. There's Calamity Jane, Matilda the Hun, who's a Nazi, so it looks like Nazis are somewhat accepted in this society instead of being beaten on sight. Man, am I glad that we don't live in a time like that. There's Nero the Hero, who might tell you to sweep the leg, Machine Gun Rambo Rocky, and the legendary Frankenstein, who we find out lost a leg in 98 and an arm in 99, so it looks like the title is accurate and we're in the year 2000. And America is ruled by Mr. President, who says that the world crashed in 1979. The race begins, and Frankenstein's co-pilot is a double agent. Frank's face is revealed, and he's not deformed Grasshopper. We then find out that the racers get points for running over people, but the resistance fights back and kills Nero. And this dance scene is definitely one of the least comfortable things I've ever had to watch. Matilda crashes and burns. Frankenstein reveals that he's not really Frankenstein, and that it's a new Frankenstein every year, and he's just the latest driver. Jane gets landmined, and it turns out that the Frank is planning to kill Mr. President with a literal hand grenade, but they use it to kill Joe, and he runs him over instead. Frank and his co-pilot get married, and he's made President Frankenstein, but I guess old habits die hard. So Death Race became a cult hit and was pretty loved, but didn't get a sequel, and then in 2008 we saw the eventual remake by Resident Evil's Paul W.S. Anderson, starring Jason Statham. It starts by telling us that in 2012 the US economy would collapse, which is kind of ironic that this movie came out in mid-2008, just a few months before the US economy actually did kind of crash. We're told that private corporations run all the prisons now, and they make the prisoners race to the death for the entertainment of the masses. We meet Frankenstein and Machine Gun Joe, and then meet Statham's Jensen, who is framed for murder, and then cuts to 6 months later. He's sent to prison, hosed down by John Connor's Six, and put into the death race as the new Frankenstein to replace the one who died in the intro. There's new opponents 14K, Grimm, Pachenko, and Colt. The race starts with Grimm going first, and Colt getting torched, and when Jensen discovers another racer as the one who killed his wife, he breaks his neck, while 14K gets blasted by the Dreadnought. In the final leg, only Frankenstein and Joe are left, but they team up and escape, while blowing up Hennessy with her own bomb. 6 months later, we see Jensen and Joe reunited with Case and Jensen's daughter in Mexico. So there's no date, but we know that it's after 2012, and there had to be enough time for the Gladiator games in the beginning to get popular and fade out, and the races have been going on for a while, so let's say 15 years after, and it'd be approximately 2027. 2 years later, in 2010, we get a sequel with Death Race 2, which glosses over the 2012 part of the intro to now just say the near future, and tells us that the Wayland Corporation is the company behind the Death Race, but sorry guys, there's no way I'm going to work this into the Alien timeline. Ned Stark shows up with Nomak, and then Luther Strickle pops in as a slightly different looking Mr. Wayland, then Lance Henriksen and AVP, and discusses the creation of the Death Race. Carl Lucas goes to jail, and he wasn't framed like a certain other Carl Lucas I know. We cut to 6 months later, and we see List's on his way to jail, and we see the deathmatch fights. 14K is here, and new guy Big Bill. Maggie's the new head of the deathmatch, and Tortuga's here too, and it takes a while, but they finally bring out the cars and start the first death race, including a few new racers, and killing them. In the middle of the second leg, Carl gets blown up, and Big Bill gets killed by his own navigator. Lucas is horribly burned, and they get the resume for Hennessy that shows experience up until 2008 or 2009, and there's another job after that, so we're at the very least past that. Carl becomes Frankenstein, kills September, and joins the race. So if this is post-2012 and enough time has passed for them to establish private prisons and a death match and people get bored of the death match, we're probably looking at about 2022 on this one, which gives time for Frankenstein to win the 4 matches and Joe to come about and win some as well, placing 5 years between this and the first film. 3 more years pass, and in 2013, Death Race 3 Inferno is unleashed. As the film starts, Frank has already won 4 races, and Wayland sells the death race to a billionaire named York. Frank's face gets fixed, and the whole team is here from the last one in a special South African race. We get new racers including Nero and their first female driver, Olga. There's these heat-seeking trackers if they try to run. Trejo gets yet another awkward sex scene. And there's a series of Mad Max-style desert races, deaths, and Goldberg gets all shot up. Lucas throws the race to 14K and crashes into the control room, and the explosion kills Katrina and Niles, and Frankenstein is horribly burned again and sent back to Terminal Island, setting up the beginning of the first film, which they say will be in 2 weeks. But it turns out it's actually York, and Lucas and Katrina faked their deaths with the help of Wayland, and hey, Goldberg's alive too, which means their plan involved all of them getting away except Lists, who has to stay in prison. Somebody's got to be in the first movie, right? So, judging from the time frame of the next race being a few weeks away, we know that this one takes place in 2027 as well, and I guess now we know why Frankenstein gets taken out so easily in the beginning of the first one. So things changed in 2017 with the release of Death Race 2050, a direct sequel to the original film. And we meet Discount Sam Loomis, and this guy says it's the 5th death race, so either they totally stopped the race in 2000 and this is the 5th one since they restarted, or this is actually not a sequel and more of kind of a soft reboot. Our new racers are Tommy, Minerva, Perfectus, a self-driving car, and Frankenstein, who takes off his mask to reveal Deathstroke. And the car's readout confirms that we're in 2050, like the title says. There's a new resistance, led by the Witchblade, and it mostly follows the exact plot of the original and some of the same jokes, although this is the first Frankenstein that allows himself to be seen without the mask by the general public. As they get closer to the end of the race, Minerva crashes and Tommy's crushed by a suicidal Ace. Jed crashes into the studio and kills the hosts, while Frankenstein wins the race. He runs down the chairman and tells the viewers to start their own races, which everyone does, and violence erupts everywhere while Frank and Annie watch on. And that leads us to this year's Death Race 4 Beyond Anarchy, which seemingly takes place after Death Race 3 and does feature the return of Danny Trejo as Goldberg, so I'm assuming that it would take place after the events of the first film, but I guess we'll have to wait and see where it fits into the timeline. So there you have it. It's 5 movies and actually 2 separate storylines. They have a pretty solid continuity. They work pretty well. All of them were pretty enjoyable. I liked watching all of them. I loved the first Death Race, and actually Death Race 2050 was a blast. So if you haven't seen that, you should check it out. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of good stuff for horror fans, action fans, a lot of great comedy as well too. Definitely worth checking out. But that's about it for this week's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll actually make some comments down below. Let me know what other action franchises you want to see, or just other franchises in general that you want to see on this channel. Let me know. Also, give me some likes and subscribe and all that good stuff. Share it on whatever social media that you like. Get it out there. It's totally fine. And then also check out my Patreon page. These guys right over here are kind enough to help support this channel and keep it going and keep me making videos for you guys. And that's what I'm going to keep on doing. So thank you to them. And in the meantime, I'll see you in another couple weeks for another great video. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.